Starting out on this analysis project, I was not sure what space to do that I could actually relate to and understand. I chose to write about the restaurant Malone's because it was a place I went with my family on special occasions, and the space itself always intrigued me. By doing this analysis, there was a lot I realized and learned about the space had I not taken the time to analyze the space. However, I found it difficult to analyze just the inside part of the restaurant because the outside was a space completely different but still greatly a part of it. The two spaces were complete opposites but fit together to bring in a great amount of revenue and customers. My essential claim was that Malone's and Harry's were two distinct spaces designed to appeal to two different types of customers. These two spaces worked extremely hard to differ themselves from one another. The furniture, the outfits required for the staff, even the food was completely different. The quality of both spaces brought all kinds of people there, but it was always pretty clear that each space was designed for a distinct type of person, and that space was doing good to appeal to that type of person. From a research standpoint, this space was difficult to analyze. It took extra time because I chose to compare two spaces rather than only analyze one. There was a lot put into making these spaces their own, and after comparing the basic differences such as furniture, lighting, and food quality, it took some time to go deeper and figure out the why factor of each of these differences. One of the main ways I conducted research on this space was to go to each space multiple times to see how the atmosphere changed at different times of the day. I made a list each time I went of how the space looked, what the average guest looked like, how the waitstaff acted towards the guests, and how I felt at each sitting. I later compared the two lists with the different times I visited and found that lunch and dinner crowds are much different. I took the personalities of the overall crowd into consideration as I focused on the actual spaces. I found that the lunch crowds at Malone's were much more business related, with someone who seemed to be trying to sell something to the other person or people. Whereas the dinner crowd at Malone's was mostly couples coming from work, dressed in their suits and dresses, or large groups of people dressed the same. I found that at Harry's, the lunch crowd was mostly blue-collar adults trying to get a quick burger in on their lunch break, whereas the dinner crowd was largely families coming to spend some time together. I also conducted an interview with Jordan Woosie, a service assistant at Malone's who has been there for the past year. She told me that the customers who came to Malone's were much different than the ones who ate at Harry's. She said it was easy to tell from how they dressed, acted, and even talked. She had worked both inside at Malone's and outside at Harry's, and she agreed with my essential claim that the two spaces were meant to appeal to different types of customers. There's a quote by Warner Leevor that says, "A restaurant is a fantasy, a kind of fantasy in which diners are the most important members of the cast." After my research, I went back into my findings and came to the conclusion that Malone's restaurant was a place for people to come when they wanted to get away, sort of like a fantasy land. The low lighting and softness of the space was meant to relax the customer. It seemed like a place you would want to go after a long day of running around. From doing this analysis, I learned that it is best to go into a space without opinions, as they could very well be wrong. I learned that each space has their own unique style and a way of delivering that style. There is a quote by Lemony Snicket that says, "Assumptions are dangerous things to make, and like all dangerous things to make, bombs for instance, or strawberry shortcake, if you make even the tiniest mistake, you can find yourself in terrible trouble." Making assumptions simply means believing things are a certain way with little or no evidence that shows you are correct, and you can see at once how this can lead to terrible trouble. Even before I had chosen these spaces for the project, I had assumed that Malone's was the place rich people went to eat, as it was a pricey restaurant. However, I found that a lot goes into making the restaurant what it is and keeping that quality of the space high. Harry's was mostly what I had thought it would be. The space was a sports bar design meant to be enjoyed by people who like to have fun. After it was all said and done, my initial claim that the two spaces were meant to attract two different types of customers seemed correct to me. Going back to the spaces at different times may have showed how the atmosphere changed, but overall the customers were of the same type. The spaces were both designed to appeal to two distinct customers. Interviewing someone who had worked there for a long time only furthered my claim and made it stronger.